Hi everyone, welcome again for a new video. This time, as I promised in my last video, we'll be looking into running macOS in a virtual machine on top of an Intel-based Mac. In the previous video, I covered the same, but specifically for a silicon-based Mac then. And although it's not so uncommon to run a virtual machine on an Intel-based Mac, in most of these cases, you would think about running Windows in a VM or maybe Linux, but it's also perfectly possible to virtualize macOS. This allows for some experimenting with different versions or playing around without the risk of breaking your main macOS instance. In this video, I'll explain you how to set this up when you have an Intel-based Mac. In that previous video, which I mentioned in the beginning already, I went into the same for a silicon-based Mac by using UTM instead. While you can also use UTM on an Intel-based Mac, it is, in this case, unfortunately, not possible to use it to run macOS under a virtual machine. So in order to get this to work if you're on x86-based Apple hardware, we need to use another hypervisor to accomplish the same, and we'll be using the free version of VMware Fusion for this. There are multiple alternatives for this software like Parallels, VMware Workstation or VirtualBox. And while I'm sure there is also a way to do this with these, VMware Fusion is free for personal use and should be one of the better performing pieces of virtualization, and I'm pretty familiar with it. For this video, I actually used two Intel-based Macs. My initial plan was to use my late 2014 Mac Mini, and although this did allow me to eventually run macOS in a virtual machine, the lack of CPU power and memory made things perform pretty poorly. So instead, I redid everything using my MacBook Pro 2019, which made a huge difference. We'll need to go through several steps to get to our end result, but the first thing we need to do is to download and install VMware Fusion. Since VMware was recently acquired by Broadcom, this all starts by getting a Broadcom account in case you don't have one yet. If you would already have an account, you can just proceed to the next chapter and log in, but to register instead, let's navigate to the download link for VMware Fusion, which I will also share in the description. Once you're there, click on the login button, top right, and click on register. Go through the steps here by first entering the code that was sent to your email address, then enter your details, and if all goes well, you should end up as follows. Once you have an account and successfully registered, like I just did, re-click the link which I provided or navigate back to that point and log in when asked. In the first selection, choose for VMware Fusion 13 Pro for personal use and click on the latest release that is available. On the next page, first agree to the terms and conditions, then click the download button right from the software in the list. Unfortunately, this requires to provide some additional personal details as mentioned here. Complete the form, then click on Submit at the bottom of that page. Finally, you'll be able to click the Cloud button right from the software in the list and start the download. Once the file is completely downloaded, just open the downloaded.dmg file and double-click on the icon in the center as is mentioned there. Confirm that you want to open the application, enter your password, then wait for the necessary components and background items to be installed. Agree to the terms and conditions when asked, and at the end of the installation, the installer will ask you for a license key. As mentioned in the beginning, as long as you plan to use VMware Fusion only for personal use, you can select this option and press continue. Now, before we can continue, we still need to give the accessibility permissions to VMware Fusion in order to use the keyboard and mouse in a virtual machine. So let's do this and open System Settings. Then we can give this permission to VMware Fusion. Now that we have VMware Fusion installed, we can go to the next step, and that is to create macOS installation media. There are several ways to get your hands on an installation package for macOS, but the easiest method, since we are running macOS on our host machine anyway, is to download it from Apple using the App Store on your device. By using the link that I will also provide in the description, or just by Googling for macOS installer, you will end up somewhere on this page. Here you can find links to all recent and less recent macOS versions that are available. I will use the link for macOS 14, Sonoma, but the process is exactly the same for any other version available. So I'll simply click on the Sonoma 14 link and choose to open the App Store. In here, click on Get and wait for the download to complete. As you can see, this can take quite some time as the installer is about 12 to 13 gigabytes in size. When the download eventually is finished, the macOS Sonoma installer app will launch on your host machine, but we don't need it here, so we can just quit the installer, and what we are looking for instead is the application install macOS Sonoma.app in your applications folder. From here, in theory, it should be possible to proceed with VM creation and installation by simply dragging this app to VMware Fusion as I'm doing here. Unfortunately, this feature seems to be broken and always results in an error message unable to create the installation medium. Searching for this online shows that I'm not the only one, and this is clearly a broader issue. Fortunately, there is a workaround for this issue and it's not very hard. As using the installer.app directly doesn't seem to work, we'll need to create a .dmg image with the required files. The process to do this is the same as you would create a USB drive for installing macOS on a real machine, except here we'll be using a virtual image instead of that physical USB drive. First of all, we need to create that empty.dmg file of about 15 GB. To do so, open a terminal window, navigate to the desktop, and create the file using the following command. As you can see, this command will create a new disk image which will be called macOS 14 install.dmg of 15 GB on the desktop. Once it is created, we first need to mount that new macOS 14 install.dmg file by double-clicking on it from the desktop. This should then be mounted under /volumes/untitled. Next, we can use the installer application that we downloaded via the App Store to fill up the image with the required installation files. Again, in terminal, type the following command. So start with sudo space, then drag the Sonoma installer.app to the terminal window and complete the command. You can use tab to autocomplete after entering the first letters. As the volume argument, we point to /volumes/untitled, which refers to that mounted macOS 14 install DMG image which we created on the desktop. When the create install media process finally is complete, we can see that the mount point changed to /volumes/install macOS Sonoma instead. But as we don't plan to use it on this real machine, we need to unmount this volume. As a result, that macOS 14 install.dmg file now contains the macOS Sonoma installer, and we're able to use it to install macOS in a virtual machine. You can reuse this same image for each installation you want to go through, just as you would be able to do with a physical USB drive that contains the installer. Okay, now we have our hypervisor, VMware Fusion, installed, and we have prepared an installation image of the macOS version which we would like to run virtually. So it's time to finally create the new virtual machine and install macOS in it. Let's start VMware Fusion again and drag the macOS 14 install.dmg file from the desktop onto the install from Disk image in Fusion. In the next step, make sure that the macOS 14 install.dmg image is selected and continue to the next one. Choose the version of macOS that matches with the image you have created earlier, in my case macOS 14, and continue. Then in the summary, click Finish. After a bit of patience, the new virtual machine will be created and it will boot up. You should get to see the Apple logo, and eventually you will end up in recovery. From here, select Install macOS Sonoma, or the version which you chose, and click Continue. Continue again. Accept the license agreement when asked, and finally select the virtual drive available and click Continue once more. After this, you'll need to be patient and let the installation complete. As I mentioned in the beginning, I did run this first on that late 2014 Mac Mini. On that machine, it took roughly 45 minutes. On my 2019 16-inch MacBook, this process still took about 30 minutes. If all goes well, you'll eventually end up with a language selection dialog, just as you would be seeing when performing a bare metal fresh installation of macOS. Just continue through the rest of the questions here regarding regional settings, creating a user, the time zone, location services, and so on until you finally reach your macOS desktop. As you can see, the virtual machine isn't able to display the moving Sonoma wallpaper, and although we can zoom in, the resolution seems to be locked to 1024 by 768. But we'll still fix this. Let's just have a quick peek at about this Mac first, where we can indeed see that we're on Sonoma or macOS version 14.5, and the virtual machine has got 4 GB of memory. Let's move on and increase this a bit and also do some other small tweaks. For that, we need to shut down the virtual machine first. Then we can click the Edit Hardware Settings icon here. Let's go to Processors and Memory. I'll increase the core count to 4 and also the memory to 8 GB. Of course, depending on the resources your host has, you could put this higher or lower. You might also have noticed that VMware Fusion shows the following when we started the virtual machine. Although as the message says, this improves security, it does make a rather large impact in performance. So let's disable these side channel mitigations. In the same settings dialog, we can just do that by going to Advanced and check the Disable Side Channel Mitigations checkbox. After this, just start the virtual machine again. Now that we have macOS installed, have the virtual machine up and running, and gave it a bit more resources, you should be able to use it as any other real macOS machine. But we still can tweak and improve things a bit, like that fixed resolution for example. To do so, we need to install VMware tools in the virtual machine. This is a set of tools developed by VMware that contains enhancements and extensions for macOS for better support and performance when running in a virtual environment. First of all, we need to unmount the virtual installation DVD by right-clicking on the DVD icon on the desktop and then click Eject Install macOS Sonoma. Next, we need to mount the VMware Tools installer virtual media by navigating to Virtual Machine, Install VMware Tools in the menu bar of your host machine, so not in the virtual machine. We get a dialog that tells us what will happen. Just click Install to continue here. And in a few seconds, you will see a new icon appear on the desktop called VMware Tools, and it will automatically show you a menu where you can run Install VMware Tools. Just click through the installer, enter your user's password when asked, and click Allow for the installer to make changes to your virtual machine. If you get a notification regarding system extensions that are blocked, click Open System Settings and allow the extension from VMware, as this is exactly what we want to have. After entering your password again, System Settings might ask you to reboot the VM, but choose Not Now here instead. Even though I was relatively fast to allow the system extension, in my case the installer for VMware Tools still failed. If this would happen to you as well, just rerun Install VMware Tools, and this time you should end up like this. Finally here we can choose to restart the VM now. After the reboot, even after the tools are installed, the display part of System Settings still doesn't allow you to choose any other resolution. Instead, you can just resize the virtual machine's window on your host and it will automatically adjust the resolution to fit. As you can see, this leads to a strange and non-standard resolution that might cause compatibility issues with certain software. In case you want to set a standard resolution or just specify the numbers yourself, open a terminal window in the VM and run the following. You can change the 1600 and 1200 in the command at the end to the horizontal and vertical resolution which you want to set. As you can see, this looks a lot more like it should already. Unfortunately, as we don't have any 3D or GPU acceleration, the dynamic wallpapers for macOS 14 are simply not displayed. The workaround is simple. Let's just set a fixed classic wallpaper. Things start to look better already. As a bonus, since it can be very handy if you want to share data or files between the guest and host machine, after we install the VMware tools, it's possible to share folders between the natively installed macOS on your real hardware and the instance running virtually. To do so, click the Edit Hardware Settings icon again on top of the VM. We don't need to shut it down this time. Navigate to Sharing and enable Shared Folders. Then click the plus icon to add a folder to share with the VM. I'll create a new folder called Test Share on my desktop. After doing these steps, the first time you're sharing something, you'll still need to allow the VMware Tools daemon to control your virtual machine. Click Open System Settings and allow the VMware Tools daemon the required access. Now you should be able to use the VMware Shared Folders icon on the desktop to access all of the folders which you selected to be shared with the virtual machine. So everything that you copy in that folder on your host or guest will appear on both the machines, as you can see. And as we just copied over a benchmark tool, let's check how that virtual machine's performance is in comparison with running on the same real hardware. First of all, I'll do the CPU performance, which I'm testing with Geekbench 5. As a result, we get 760 and 2956. Compared with running the same test on the non-virtualized hardware, we can see there clearly is an impact of the performance. But all in all, even though the amount of virtual cores for the VM is limited to 4, multi-core performance isn't that bad. Definitely, these are values that are very usable. A lot of Macs have a much worse core, take for example that late 2014 iMac, even when running macOS natively. Let's do the same with Geekbench 6 now, which is newer. As a result here, we're getting 976 and 3042. Again, compared with the same test run natively on this machine, we see a difference of around 20 to 25%, but the numbers are showing us that we're still getting very usable performance in the virtual machine. Now, for this performance, let's use AJ System Test, which I copied over earlier using the shared folder feature. You can see that the initial write performance is good, but it slows down when writing more data. Reading seems to be stable around 1.5 gigabytes per second. Again, nothing near the native performance, but again, also nothing that will drastically slow things down. That was it for the video. Thanks a lot for watching, and hopefully this will help you to get macOS up and running in a virtual machine. If you have liked this video, it's always nice to give a thumbs up. If you're into more of this kind of content, subscribe to my channel, and if you would have any questions or something to share, always welcome in the comments. Thanks again, and hope to see you back here soon.